Michael Knowles opens the podcast by reflecting on how much the world has transformed since 2019, a mere 6 years ago. Highlighting a pivotal moment of cultural conflict, he recounts how, at that time, he faced severe backlash for merely observing that Greta Thunberg appeared mentally unwell and was being exploited politically. Knowles notes that what was then labeled disgusting and led to his temporary ostracism from conservative media is now commonly acknowledged without hesitation. This shift exemplifies the broader cultural thaw from an era steeped in moral panic and ideological rigidity to one where truths previously demonized can be voiced more freely. This reflection is not just about free speech, but about the collective awakening from a protracted period of societal fever that wrought extensive damage, including pushing many to despair and even suicide. Knowles emphasizes that the cultural revolution of that era inflicted lasting scars and that those responsible for the hysteria were never held accountable. The conversation frames this as a long overdue moment to appreciate how far the country has come in reclaiming sanity and balance after years of ideological excess. The conversation shifts intriguingly to nicotine consumption, with Knowles sharing his personal history with cigars, which he started smoking at 15. He contrasts contemporary attitudes toward tobacco with historical and religious references, citing popes and saints who consumed tobacco, underscoring its once normalized and even revered status. Knowles portrays cigars as a bridge between cultural tradition and personal ritual, arguing for the reemergence of nicotine products like Alpier as alternatives that encourage social connection and manly camaraderie, elements lost in the digital age. Expanding the discussion on nicotine, Knowles contends that tobacco consumption has unexpected cultural and even physiological benefits, such as raising testosterone and fostering independent thought, traits that authoritarian regimes allegedly seek to suppress. This idea ties into the podcast's deeper themes of bodily reality and freedom amidst modern control and technological encroachment. Knowles' involvement in the cigar industry also serves as a symbolic counterpoint to a society increasingly disconnected from physical experiences. Delving into contemporary tragedies, Knowles discusses the Minneapolis church shooting as a chilling manifestation of nihilistic and contradictory ideologies coalescing in violent acts. Analyzing the manifesto connected to the attacker, which blended anti-Christian, anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, and anti-LGBT sentiments, Knowles emphasizes the incoherence of modern radicalism. He interprets the attack as more than political extremism, but a sign of demonic influence and spiritual disorientation, illustrating the modern failure to anchor identity in divine truth. This event crystallizes a theme throughout the podcast. Modernity's fragmentation spawns individuals caught between competing ideologies and ultimately lost. Knowles draws on religious and philosophical references to highlight that true identity is found only in God, and the absence of this leads to existential crises and violence. The broader cultural implication is a warning about the spiritual void that undergirds much contemporary discord. Returning to religion, Knowles explores the rise of Catholicism in the current age, contrasting it with the prevailing secular and disembodied spiritual trends. He explains the Catholic notion of sacramental theology as a profound marriage of the material and immaterial, the physical acts of worship embodying spiritual realities. Knowles suggests this sacramental worldview offers a bulwark against the alienation and disconnection characterizing modern digital life, as it affirms the importance of the body and tangible tradition in defining human identity. He notes the dramatic revival of Catholicism, especially among youth, attributing it to a deep hunger for meaning grounded in ritual, history, and incarnational faith, factors largely absent from more privatized or abstract religious expressions. Catholicism's insistence on continuity, community, and the physicality of worship counters the age's disenchanted chaos and reflects a larger cultural reawakening to the sacred in everyday existence. A significant portion of the podcast examines Vatican II, the ecumenical council that profoundly reshaped the Catholic Church's approach to modernity. Knowles, a self-described traditionalist, carefully distinguishes between the council's official pastoral documents and the sweeping liturgical and cultural reforms that followed, which many see as responsible for weakening the Church's cultural influence post-1960s. He highlights Pope Benedict XVI's insights that politicized or misapplied reforms fueled the crisis rather than the Council itself. The Council's nuanced position on doctrine, including reaffirming exclusivity in salvation while encouraging dialogue with other faiths, is underscored to dispel misconceptions. Knowles stresses the importance of hermeneutics that interpret Vatican II with continuity rather than rupture, situating it within 2,000 years of tradition rather than as a total break. The conversation reveals the ongoing theological and cultural struggle within Catholicism as it reclaims identity amidst modern challenges. Knowles traces his own spiritual journey from youthful atheism to Christian faith, emphasizing rational arguments such as the ontological proof of God's existence, as well as insights from C.S. Lewis and classical theologians like John Henry Newman. He critiques the modern relativistic mindset that reduces religion to private opinion or wishful thinking, calling instead for a recognition of religion's claim to universal truth accessible by reason and evident in natural law. The guest argues that despite the decline of institutional religion in the West, the human impulse toward faith and meaning persists, and that Christianity uniquely provides a framework integrating spirit, soul, and body. This resurgence is framed as a necessary counter to the failed extremes of new atheism and unmoored spiritual subjectivism, underscoring religion's public, rational, and transformative character. Turning to politics, Knowles applauds Donald Trump as a transformative figure who disrupted the degraded political status quo by reasserting executive authority and embodying a pragmatic, non-ideological form of leadership. He likens Trump's coalition to an unprecedented fusion of disparate groups united by shared interests rather than rigid dogma. The podcast analyzes the American system as a mixed regime, a balance of democratic, aristocratic, and monarchical elements that requires vigilant maintenance lest it decay into tyranny or mob rule. Knowles warns that America is at risk of political disintegration driven by cultural fragmentation and weakened civic virtue, echoing historical cycles of regime collapse. He advocates for strong, purposeful leadership capable of restoring order without succumbing to extremism, positing Trump and his successors as key players in this ongoing struggle to preserve constitutional governance. A substantial segment addresses Trump's approach to Israel and the complex dynamics of the Middle East. Knowles interprets Trump as a pragmatic imperialist in the classical sense, one who acknowledges the realities of power and the intractability of territorial conflicts, such as the Gaza situation. He doubts any swift, permanent peace is feasible and insists the goal is to manage conflict to minimize bloodshed while safeguarding critical interests, including Christian access to holy sites. Trump's policy is portrayed as realistic and grounded in acceptance of competing hard interests rather than utopian idealism, contrasting sharply with previous American administrations' failed efforts at transformative diplomacy. Knowles highlights Trump's nuanced stance on Russia and global affairs, arguing that such pragmatic realism is often mischaracterized by opponents as weakness or betrayal, when in fact it reflects a sober understanding of international power relations. Throughout the podcast, Knowles speaks warmly of his friendship with Candace Owens, acknowledging her star power and remarkable cultural impact. He reveals his personal connection as godfather to her daughter and notes Owens' own recent conversion to Catholicism, underscoring the podcast's recurring theme of faith's resurgence within prominent conservative figures. Their relationship symbolizes a broader dynamic of ideological and spiritual renewal among younger leaders reshaping the right. Knowles also comments on her unique charisma and cultural stature, recalling anecdotes of public recognition tied to association with Owens. This segment accentuates the intertwining of politics, faith, and personal bonds within contemporary conservative circles and frames Owens as a potent figure representing these converging trends. Knowles discusses the importance of timely marriage and family formation, responding to a listener query about encouraging adult children to start families sooner. He critiques modern trends that treat marriage as a capstone achieved after prolonged personal indulgence, arguing instead that marriage is the foundation of a full life and is best entered when individuals are young and flexible enough to grow together. He shares personal experience supporting early commitment not only on spiritual and relational grounds, but also for practical benefits, such as increased personal responsibility, emotional resilience, and economic success. He highlights marriage as a stabilizing force integral to individual flourishing and cultural vitality, lamenting the societal inversion that delays family formation and often leads to loneliness and dysfunction. Addressing intergenerational tensions, Knowles weighs in on the critiques of baby boomers, acknowledging that while many boomers cared deeply for their children, the generation was marked by an ideological selfishness that prioritized individual happiness and self-expression, often at the expense of order and tradition. This ethos, he argues, contributed to cultural decay by promoting relativism and undermining firm moral boundaries. Knowles calls for the restoration of clarity and conservative values, encouraging parents, especially boomers, to assert stronger guidance based on truth and love rather than permissiveness. He views this as essential for reversing the societal fragmentation and confusion that currently undermine American cohesion and identity.